Hello, I'm Peter Asmus, Director of Strategic Marketing for AutoGrid, and here we are on the Grid Edge, a podcast series, and today we have Vish Ganti with us. Vish, welcome. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Peter, and great to be here on the podcast. I'm a VP of product for the company at AutoGrid. I've been with AutoGrid for 6 years, and I build all the products at the company with my wonderful team and engineering.
Great. Well, not only do you work for AutoGrid, but you've put yourself in the shoes of what people are calling prosumers these days. I guess I don't know if I've ever seen an official definition, but the idea is you're not just a consumer, which we all used to be sort of passive consumers of electricity when we had no choices, no options. Prosumers actually generate some of their own power and provide other kinds of services. And so, why don't you tell us a little bit? How did you start this journey on being a prosumer with your own solar and battery systems?
Yeah, I mean, so fundamentally, what it means is power is bidirectional, right? So I think at the top, a consumer has just been pulling power from the grid, and it's a unidirectional flow. Physically, a prosumer means somebody who's able to generate power, send back to the grid, and also draw from the grid. Uh, and while they're doing that, they can provide valuable services and reinforcements to the grid from a resiliency and safety point of view. And also a local, power, clean power available for local consumption for not just yourself, but if you have excess, you can send some of that back to the grid and allow others to tap into that.
Sure. So where did you start? I think maybe you actually had solar already, and so that you didn't actually have to install the solar,
No, I didn't have
correct?
to install the solar. That was a great part. So I ended up focusing on the emerging tech at the time. This was in 2018, right? And I've built like IoT test
Okay.
beds all my life, like physical, like smart home products and collection of data and like running micro experiments on myself and to understand behavioral patterns, etc. So this was like a perfect setting because I had the house, I had the solar, and then all it needed was just the battery and lots and lots of sensors and instrumentation to like collect a lot of data for that analysis.
Okay. So you added the battery, and so how long have you had this sort of combined solar battery
Now I
system?
would say about for four
How
years.
long?
It's been fully operational for 4 years. I would say it was in the first 500 of the batteries that got deployed in California. So it was also
Hmm.
not just from a technology perspective, but it's also looking at how quickly, from project lifecycle standpoint, quickly does it get, from when you say yes to when it gets commissioned and installed. And even understanding are utilities prepared to interconnect the volume of assets that are about to come onto the grid, right? Because my batteries took over like a month to 2 months to get fully interconnected. That's how long PG&E took to turn the batteries on. They were installed much earlier, but things have gotten a lot better now. We've learned a lot from that experience, and I think batteries are getting connected much faster than what they've ever been.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to say I'm trying to become a prosumer. Just a short story. I think I first applied, and my situation's different. No solar, brand new home. I applied first last May, and I'm dealing with a homeowners association. So I guess even though California's got all these progressive policies, it's amazing how still there can be issues with education. Like now the battery will be inside the garage. Originally, the solar company, a partner of AutoGrid, and I want to become part of the VPP of AutoGrid. Didn't want to, but then we found out because it's a brand new home, it was fireproof, so the battery could go in the garage. And I might even find out today that it's finally approved. So there's going to be a happy ending to the story, but it can be a journey. You were lucky; you already had the solar and the battery. But so I guess most people probably start with saying, I want economic benefits for myself. I want to reduce my energy
Mhm.
consumption, but being with AutoGrid, we also know there's power in numbers. And so let's talk about this. These prosumers, the big trend now is with software. You basically can kind of partner with your neighbors who all may have, maybe one only has solar, doesn't have a battery, maybe one's got an EV charger. But this idea that all of these small sources can somehow be aggregated into something larger and actually provide value beyond just your home. So maybe talk about that a
Yeah,
little
I
bit.
think, and we're seeing the ground being set for this innovation to happen right here in California, and that's something super excited. Again, you look at what's happening with the CCA market, the community choice aggregator market. These are the local markets that have the regulatory structure to procure locally, and that's where the real power starts to unlock,
Right.
because these CCAs can say, instead of procuring, like, dirty power from the grid, or when it's expensive, I can pay people in my communities, but and then just have these aggregation programs run. And we're seeing a big uptick for those type of aggregation programs, and that is actually the opportunity that
Hmm.
homeowners need to be educated of. I have lots of friends who I talk to who are curious about how can it be part of this mission. Like, do I go get geothermal heat pumps, or do I go look at battery projects, right? And when they start going down the discovery process of how to tap into those, it's very painful. It's not easy. It's not straightforward. It's very convoluted, and the rules change by county to county. So so there is a little bit of
Right.
streamlining on that side that has improved things.
Yeah, I think it will only improve. I mean, I think I've seen, we are going to be more dependent on these small distributed energy resources. And so that's why things like a virtual power plant, which really is just a concept someone invented a long time ago. Well, not a long time ago, but this idea that, comparing it to a traditional power plant. So instead of a coal plant, which is, usually sited somewhere distant, runs 24/7, you don't really have any idea what's going on with it. The idea of the virtual power plant is all these small, cleaner resources that through techniques like artificial intelligence can kind of be stitched together and actually just deliver what the grid needs just at that exact
Yeah.
time. It's kind of mind-boggling that it's possible, but obviously at AutoGrid, we've been working on it, well, for over 10
Yeah,
years.
I tell folks this is as transformational as virtual machines were when, like in 2000s, early 2000s, we were consolidating physical hardware and deploying virtual machines, right? Companies like VMware, like these things became, you just try to draw a parallel to that, and see, that we've seen this happen. And what came out of it is this cloud innovation, right? Cloud was born because virtual machines actually provided that kind of capability to virtualize compute resources, right? If you draw that same
Right.
parallel and compare that with, what's happening in virtual power plants, once you start virtualizing power and then it's bidirectional, there are so many value streams that you can unlock. But then what I'm finding out is that the roadmap is to getting there requires a lot of innovations to come together sequentially, right? So we have things like the battery OEMs improving on the latency and communications, the standards on smart homes that allow you to connect other products. This was one of my own biggest gripes about the things that I did, was I had to jerry rig everything, right? Like hard code data from point A to point B and write logic on top. It shouldn't be like that hard to for devices to talk together. And I think with protocols like Matter standard, like the standard that just came out, we will only see a better interoperability and improvements for how these systems talk to one another, and then share information and knowledge, and so that AI can be applied on top of that master data set.
Right. I think we had a conversation previously that even your own home system, and here you are an expert and a solution architect, that it wasn't fully optimized. I think you said something like your smart thermostat wasn't, I forgot how you put it. Maybe you
Yeah,
can explain it, but that it wasn't
yeah,
quite, synced up with the solar I mean, ideally it would all be. And I think we should point out that it's not just generation. We're talking a lot of it's load management, which a lot of people don't, people when they think, oh, I'm a prosumer, they immediately think, oh, solar panel. But obviously, there's actually all kinds of assets in your home that all can be part of a virtual load.
Absolutely. And I think every little bit adds up, right? So if you don't have a
Yep.
coordinated strategy for your home, because what you essentially are enrolling in virtual power plants are homes, right? And assets are just participants that respond to different conditions and deliver those, like, the electrons and or take electrons, right? In the case where you charge assets like batteries and EVs. So it is about grid flexibility. It's about tapping into as many assets as you can, so you can coordinate them for the
Hmm.
optimal output at where you're metered and you're built. That's your service point. That's your home. And today, even till today, I still see a lot of gaps in that area, and I think AutoGrid is trying to address those with AI and optimization technologies.
Right. Now, one thing you did mention EVs, electric vehicles, and AutoGrid now has just recently announced some new solutions. I think that I've heard folks, and I guess the very first asset that AutoGrid interconnected with was actually an electric vehicle over 10 years ago. But let's talk a little bit about those electric vehicles, because I remember when we first heard about electric vehicles, it was always viewed as like a negative, sort of like, oh, this is a challenge. These EVs are about the size of a home. They're going to just be popping up everywhere. How's the grid going to handle all of that? It's going to be, it was sort of more like, oh, this is a major problem. But we're kind of now turning that conversation around like, well, they're also a solution to a lot of this. And if you especially mix up that with these other assets, you just actually kind of have a more resilient sort of, theoretically, with the right control platform, synergistic kind of resource. But what about
Yeah, I
EVs?
think first up, the way I see this is you don't have to convince anybody to buy an EV. First of all, a car, fundamentally. Like, people will buy cars because they need to get from point A to point B. It just comes down to the economic decision
Hmm.
about, can I invest in an EV? And when we see price points below like the 35 to $40,000 range, you start seeing more mid-segment cars enter that space, and adoption starts to take on, right? So I'm very bullish. I think EVs are here to stay, and people will adopt very fast. Um, the if you the challenge is definitely how do you engage and tap into that stuff, those assets from a very early stage, right? Because there's a customer acquisition cost. Like, so think about when you buy a car, you get auto butler. Like, the guy sends sites, gives you auto butler when you buy the car. You don't actually go through the process of finding those customers and then upselling them an auto butler. I think, in my view, VPP joining a VPP should be that simple. When you buy a car, your price should include the because you're participating in DR, we will shave off a percentage off of your vehicle cost because you've been signed into a VPP, right? And then that's
Well,
my
yeah.
long-term plan, and it should be like how insurance is sold or any other top-ups are sold. In this case, what's attractive about VPP is this one pays you in return, not like you don't have to pay additional.
Right. And I guess the other idea of a VPP is, as I was, you have your solar, your battery system, but sometimes, and one thing we haven't brought up yet is the net metering. So the value we've had is, oh, well, you kind of barter with the utility. So, the meter spins backwards. So you're not home all day, but the solar is peaking, and so that goes back to the grid. Now the rules are changing in California. Of course, each state is a little bit different, but California often leads. So talk about, are these net metering rule changes good, bad, or how's that just going to change
Well,
things?
it depends on which direction you come at. Like, if you talk to all the energy, folks in the industry and also the battery OEMs, they're super excited because from their perspective, people will start installing the business proposition for just having standalone batteries have now all of a sudden become more viable because you can actually use them for TOU and time of use arbitrage. Um,
Hmm.
so I feel like this is in some way. So, but then if you talk about the customer, the customer has to now deploy additional systems to tap into that extra value. Otherwise, you're selling at 70% cheaper than what you're buying at. So you're not making that kind of revenue that you're
Right.
expected. And all of a sudden now the ROI on that is much longer because of the economic model changing. So then again, VPPs can still come
Right.
back in and help rebalance some of that, because you're able to monetize those assets, not for just selling back to the grid, but essentially by participating through virtual power plants.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, the solar lobby, of course, is saying this is bad, and there's less value to solar systems. On the other hand, it probably means every new solar, especially residential system, will probably be paired with a battery, which in some ways creates even a more attractive prosumer pool of assets for VPP. So I think it'll take a while for that maybe to sink in, but it's true that then I guess we have to. So you want to. Then there's more value to storing that energy because you're not getting
Yep.
paid as much sending it back to the grid. Um, Now, one thing we do want to talk about is, but how do you maximize the value of all these behind the meter DER assets? And, we haven't even mentioned all of it. It could be water heaters, you kind of smart
Hmm.
thermostats, I mean, I don't know, the
The,
list kind of goes on. It's kind of mind boggling when you think about it. What's all considered a DER? I think that list keeps growing every time I look at a list.
well, it
Yeah.
keeps growing for sure, but you're also getting smaller loads now. Like, you want to classify like a refrigerator, like I have a fridge that, or a dishwasher that can actually have like Wi-Fi built into it. You can control and change some of the shave 50 watts. But I think the big opportunity is definitely the thermostats and EVs, because that represents like your 60, 70% of the load. Then you have the dryers and other, like, washers and things like that, which are substantial load. An electric dryer is going to be pretty substantial load. The thing that is missing is that when you have opportunities where there's excess power, instead of sending back, can you use that to pre-cool your house? Can you do that? Can you pre-charge something else in the house so that you don't have to sell back all of that excess power to the grid? Today, this is what I mean by a thermostat should know what's happening at the meter so that it can do some pre-cooling by itself. That intelligence doesn't exist, right? and and each product has a different app, and they're configured differently, and that fragmentation of that ecosystem is visible now more than ever before.
Right. Now, one thing, of course, we haven't mentioned yet, of course, AutoGrid was recently acquired by Schneider Electric, obviously a big company that has kind of lots of assets also, and kind of more infrastructure at the distribution level, heavily involved with microgrids, yet another kind of way to aggregate assets. So how, I mean, from your perspective, I guess, is that has the acquisition of AutoGrid by Schneider Electric, is that maybe going to help resolve some of these issues? Or it's probably bigger than obviously just one company, but how do you see that maybe accelerating VPPs and DER sort of
Yeah, I think
solutions?
it presents a very exciting opportunity, because Schneider makes all kinds of products for both consumer facing products, commercial buildings, industrial process automation. So all of these are basically digital energy businesses, in one shape or form. They're hardware oriented, but they all need the same context of VPPs. So what we're going to go after is enabling VPPs powered by AutoGrid in all of the Schneider product lines, right? So that direction uh, presents this very unique opportunity where we can take every site and just label it, powered by AutoGrid or enabled by AutoGrid. Just like, we used to have laptops which were Intel inside, right? Or they still
Right.
are, you
Right.
know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, that's good. I mean, I mean, we've been talking about California because you and I are both here in California, but we have to point out this is a global phenomenon, first of
Absolutely.
all, and happening in Australia, India, Japan, Europe, Maybe not as much in Latin America, but it'll also spread, to these areas. But um, let's talk about data. You are call yourself maybe a data hound or whatever, but that's part of the key here. And let's kind of wrap up with thinking about what how does that so is that the key to making this VPP model even more persuasive? How much of it, there's the electricity part, but I know a lot of people are kind of talking about the cross section of IT kind of innovations and electricity, and those two are kind of becoming closer and closer and intertwined. But what about data? How much data do we need to do
Yeah,
this
I
kind of
think
stuff?
in a distributed world, I think intelligence should also be distributed, right? We sometimes tend to make these decisions
Hmm.
where we centralize the decision making. It's quite the opposite, right? And
Right.
that is why people like what like about blockchains, unfortunately, because it's distributed in nature, so it provides a lot more resiliency and scalability in the architecture, right? So data
Hmm.
is king,
Right.
and data is the only way you can make informed decision making. And inferring different scenarios based on commingling data from, like, say, thermostats and EVs and batteries, and all of that existing in one location, so that you can take intelligent and informed decisions across these different assets. That is actually a big part of it. And we also have to, often a conversation is lost in privacy and, like, how much visibility does a VPP provider have to get really? Can we actually put some of the data on the edge so that we don't need to see all of that? Maybe we just expose the value that we create, through some KPIs and metrics, without compromising any security and safety of our and privacy of our customers who join these VPPs. So these are deep-rooted issues that we're all thinking
Right.
of, and Schneider has has best practices that we're looking at, because they've done this time and again. So there's definitely uh, some value that we can gain from sticking to these global standards that Schneider has set itself from the entire audience.
Right. Well, thanks so much, Vish. I mean, I'm sure a lot folks can learn about being prosumers. There's going to be more and more prosumers out there. So thanks very much for joining on the Grid Edge.
Thanks, Peter. It was great chatting with you.